Let's do it, baby. Let's get into the news. Whew. Get properly hydrated before we do. Take a sip of the old creatine water. Whew. This creatine, it's getting me jacked, but also fat. Take a little bit of LaCroix. Whew. Lime, duh. One of the great flavors. Poured over ice. It's twice as nice. Crack an iced tea. Drink a water. Have a coffee with your face on it. Let's do it. Yeah. Woo. 5 beverages to talk the news. The chance of me peeing is 100% during the pod, everybody. Woo! Welcome to the Damn Black Attack podcast, and let's get right into what we're doing here. Welcome to the Regular Guy News, RGN, the least pretentious name in news. I am Dan Black, and I am a regular guy, and here's what I think. Pop, 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 pop. Hello. Wow. We are back after a week off, and let me tell you, everybody, I appreciate all the kind words of people saying, where was RGN last week? People were messaging me, and you know what? I'll tell you where it was. I was on vacation. I'm allowed to take vacation. Many people say you're not allowed to take vacation, and frankly, I disagree with those people. But we're back for some hard-hitting action. The Dan Black Attack podcast has now been commandeered by the Regular Guy News, and that means, as always, our regular news correspondent, the only correspondent out in the field right now, Erin Finnerty, is here. Erin, hello. Welcome to the newsroom.
Hello, Dan. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm reporting live from the field today.
Yes.
On the second floor of my apartment in Los Angeles, California.
Wow.
1 mile from your house.
So you have a second story. Would that count as privilege in today's day and age?
Well, I have the higher ground. And
Yes.
I actually have 3 stories, so
Wow.
pump the brakes, folks.
All right. Well,
does that make me a regular guy? I'll let you decide.
Well, that's only up to you guys, right? Because, but listen, if you're new to the podcast, this is the Regular Guy News. This is the least pretentious name in news. We're literally just checking out the news cycle, watching the CNNs, checking out the Jake Tappers, the Don Lemons,
the Lems, the Taps, the
Tucks.
Blitzes.
Yeah, absolutely. We're this is I got all these questions. I'm like, what are you guys talking about? You know, if things come up, they move on, talk about the same things, give me too much of their opinion, which I don't care about at all. So we're diving deeper into the stuff where I go, hey, I'm just a dude watching the news. What the fuck's going on? Right? All right.
100.
And we got a serious topic for the podcast this week, which we'll get into. But before we do, just remember, this podcast is grassroots. Give us 5 stars right now on Apple Podcasts. Grab your iPhone, give us 5 stars, and in your description, you can write something you want to say on the show, and I am legally bound to read your comments on the show.
It's part of the Regular Guy News terms of service, so you can find that clause in the TOS.
Absolutely. It's a long PDF document online. It's many, many pages. Now, also, we have the Regular Guy News mailbag, another way for you to interact, where you can send us an email about a question you have as a regular guy out there. And guy, gal, whatever. We use guy interchangeably. Everything's fluid nowadays. Regular Guy News, whatever. You're all guys to me. If you want. I don't know. But, yeah, you can send us an email at regularguynews@gmail.com. And we will answer your question the best we can by promising to dive at least 2 articles deep. And so, Erin, do we have any hits on the mailbag this week?
Dan, the mailbag is overflowing this week. We took
a
week off.
That's unbelievable.
In observance of your vacation and the Democratic National Convention.
2 national holidays.
Yes. And wow, the mailbag is packed. We have 2 mailbag items this week.
Wow. I can't believe it. And I just want to say, my vacation, before we get into the mailbag for a sec, I did take a vacation. I went to Sedona. I was out in nature, and I was not watching the news for a week.
is like a true signal of a actual vacation.
And then it was kind of crazy because I was like just enjoying myself. I was hanging with some friends, my wife, out in nature, in God's America, as many would say. But
Right.
and it's two things that are really funny. One thing is when I did turn on the news a couple times, like I would just flick through, like I turned on the DNC for a second. I was like, this is like triggering me. I got to turn this off. Like it's ruining the vacation. Just seeing any news ruins the vacation.
It pulls you out of like relaxation mode.
Right. And then
Well,
the next thing is that when you're walking around, you can't, it's the first time you cannot escape politics because you walk by somebody, if they're wearing a mask, you know that they're a liberal. If they're not wearing a mask, they're a fucking Trump guy, right?
Yeah, we're wearing it on our faces. And in particular in Arizona, where like, you don't know. It's not like coastal elites out here in California and Los Angeles. It's, a little different there.
Yeah, and so the reason I wanted to say this before the mailbag is because I want to get this in because it doesn't tie into the mailbag topic that I believe we have. But it's really interesting the way people are taking this mask thing because I think people think this is binary. Either you're a mask guy or you're not a mask guy. But as someone who went to Arizona, which is a state that is a conflicted state, it's definitely a red state when in voting. But I was in Sedona, which is a liberal area. But when you're driving, rest stops are a haven for all politics. Right? So you can get to these cities. So when you get to like a rest stop or like, so here's the patterns I observed with the masks. Okay. And I'll say this just to get this out of the way. I am pro-mask. I think you should wear a mask. I believe it's patriotic to wear a mask. Even Trump, I think said it was patriotic to wear a mask for one day and then wore it only one time.
It has his name on it. It's patriotic.
Right. So it's as everything Trump does, it's extremely confusing. But people are generally, I would say, here's the patterns I witnessed. People have the masks. They have them. Okay. That's pretty consistent. Most people have masks. I've noticed. I would say 80% of people have a mask on them. Now, the proper usage of the mask is all over the map. Yeah. Okay. But so meaning they're down a lot. Okay. But also, I noticed a lot of people wearing masks thinking they're full-on protections, that they're hazmat suits from Corona. So the social distancing is out the window.
Right. It's not a combo platter. You get one or the other.
Absolutely. I think that my observation was that there's more mask wearing and almost no social distancing. That was my observation. People were in line right back to back of people.
Yeah, I mean, I've observed that here.
Right.
I think that there's a misconception that you don't have to do both. Right. But I think both is the correct way to be doing things.
Right, because even 6 feet is not a scientific number, really. It's just kind of so they can give you an actual distance. So I noticed that. Here's another trend I noticed, okay? I noticed husband and wife were just couples. And for all these observations, these were a classic heterosexual couple, okay?
Sure.
But definitely some probably closeted folks in the zone I was in, okay? At least one.
The Arizona.
Yeah. But it would be the woman in the relationship properly wearing a mask and the man zero mask. I saw this over and over again. Couples where the girlfriend or the wife is actually abiding by it, but the husband's not, and them thinking that does anything, right?
Right.
I guess technically it does, but you're also like...
But it's like a 1-to-1 ratio. It's like they cancel each other out.
Right. And that also made me think that I had an interesting thought, which was that I feel like households are split voting more than we believe.
Oh, that's an interesting hypothesis.
Right? If like your husband's like, I'm not rocking the mask, and you're like, and it really was women to man. I never saw it the other way around. Never. And I was really keyed into it. And I was on the road I was doing like an 8-hour drive. I did that 2 ways. A lot of stopping because you know how many beverages I drink. So a lot of pee. Yeah.
How many cup holders you got?
Absolutely. Plus, only 2. Whack. Oh, whatever. I digress on that, on cup holders, because fucking, I need a car that has 6 cup holders. I want like 25 cup holders.
Just up front.
Yeah. Are any of you drinking anything? How are these cars being sold?
Yeah, I need more cup holders. Anyway.
That made me more angry than the mask thing. I'll be honest.
Sorry. Triggered.
Anyway, I'm just saying, like, I feel like these wives are saying, like, well, I'm wearing the mask. I don't give a fuck what you're doing, Len. Right?
Right. Fuck you, Len. Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that makes sense too, because you could generalize and say women have more of this like maternal instinct where they want to protect, and guys don't give a fuck, so they're just like, fine. And then in the man's mind, they're like, well, you're wearing a mask, so you're protected from me only, and I'm protected from you only, so
okay, but let's use your household as an example, Erin.
Let's use it.
If you were would you say that you believe that people should wear masks publicly?
I believe that people should wear masks publicly.
Okay, so let's say you and Mike were going out, and you're wearing the mask. Mike's like, I don't want to wear a mask. How does that go down? If you mind me prying.
Well, we wouldn't go out. And if I may.
Yeah.
Sorry, my dog's barking right now because this whole topic has gotten her
she's
riled
triggered.
up.
Yeah,
she's
absolutely.
I will say that I actually have been on hikes where my husband has pulled his mask down and has walked past another person less than 6 feet away, and I have gotten mad on the trail and said,
you gotta lift it.
I know we're outside, but that person was less than 6 feet away from you, and you walked past them without a mask on.
Right.
How dare you? But his defense is, listen, I wear the mask all day at work. I know mask protocol. We're outside. It's fine. But I still get mad.
Okay, but so fine. That's a really specific example. But we're talking about if he was like, I'm fucking putting on my Oakleys
and
my cutoff, and I'm not even bringing a mask. Masks are bullshit. You can wear it if it makes you comfortable, but I'm not doing it.
I would say I'm not going out with you. I'm not going on a date with you. I'm not going out with you.
Absolutely.
In fact,
it wouldn't happen.
We went to go out. I forgot to bring a mask on the dog walk the other day, and I got 10 feet from my house, and I said, I need a mask. And he said, come on, it's fine. I said, I am not going on this walk with you right now unless we both have masks. I'm very principled.
All right, so you're hardcore with the mask.
I'm hardcore.
You heard it here first, everybody. Erin goes for the masks. Lock it in. All right, let's get into the mailbag. I digress.
Oh, the mailbag.
Back to the mailbag. What are the mailbag topics?
Okay. Well, first up, we have listener JM. We have 2 questions that kind of tie into one another, so I'll read you both. JM writes, hi, RGN. Since the inauguration, Bill Maher has been saying that Trump won't leave if he loses the election. Now, with the election looming, many articles have been written about the possibility. Top results of the search, quote, will Trump leave, include The Guardian, Washington Post, The New Yorker, etc.
The New Yorker. Yeah.
And then he shared a link to an article that was written by a retired Army officer and a retired Army veteran to General Milley, asking the question, what will you do if Trump doesn't leave the White House? And Jay asks, what do we think?
Wow. Okay, so look, thank you for your question. It's great.
And we have a second question that ties into this topic as well. But if you'd like to address JM directly.
Well, first I want to thank you for hitting the mailbag. And this is a fucking great question. And yes, Bill Maher's been saying this for years, that he does not see Trump leave. And he asks every single Democrat that comes on his program, he asks every single one of them, what's your plan for when this inevitably happens? If he loses, he's not going, right? And they all had every answer I've seen has been a varying degree of a brush off, like the question is ridiculous, to I don't know, to the army will take him out. Like, it's not even a problem. So it's been actually a very confusing question considering the amount of times I've seen this asked. And so I did a little diving into this. Erin, do you think you want to tie in the second mailbag to this, or should I go into my stuff?
Let me read the second.
Right, read it, and then I'll dive into my answer as a regular guy.
Sure. And our second mailbag item comes from listener Pat F. Who, in the interest of full disclosure,
right,
may or may not be my dad.
Yeah. All right, Mr. P. Finnerty.
Yeah, P. Finnerty. Oh, Pat F. Whatever.
My bad.
Listener who may or may not be my dad, Pat F. writes.
Right.
Hello,
it's
Dan.
Crazy. He asked the same question.
I know, it's wild. Pat F. writes, hello, Dan and Erin. This is Pat in Commerce Township, Michigan. Just wanted to drop you a line to tell you that I really enjoy your Regular Guy podcast. I think it's informative, thought-provoking, and with Dan's brain running a mile a minute towards the next thought, very lively. So, I have a couple of questions for you two. First, what do you think will be happening in the streets of America if that maniac in the White House is reelected? And would you agree with me that after Rush Limbaugh was awarded the Medal of Freedom, every previous recipient of that award should have returned them or burned them in the street? Thank you for your podcast. Also, the honesty and most importantly, the humor that is always there lurking are what makes it so much better than the ordinary stuff on the major networks. And if your audience has not heard heard Dan tell the story of the lost iPhone on the Comedians of Wrestling podcast, they should search it out. It is a great story of a man's descent into madness in search of the thing he loves most.
My phone.
Thank you, Pat F., for your contribution to this.
Wow.
The mailbag.
Thank you, Pat F. Tremendous mailbag.
Two-parter question.
Yeah, and a lot in there. Well, wow.
Yeah.
All right, a lot of stuff. Well, thank you. Yeah. So the question, you can hear my story about losing my phone and finding it on the Comedians of Wrestling podcast.
Yeah, it's a great
probably
story.
like a couple weeks back. It's in the description if you want to check that out. Maybe we'll bring that story over here one time. It'll probably technologically will tie into one of our topics at some point.
Yes.
And also, thank you for complimenting how my mind jumps around. Many would say that's called unprofessional hosting. Many would say that.
Not on this podcast.
Not on this podcast. But, and also, many people would call that a disorder. But
well, again, not on this podcast.
And plus, undiagnosed, so it doesn't count. Well, okay. So in terms of the Rush Limbaugh getting the what's it called, that award again?
Medal of Freedom.
Right, the Medal of Freedom. So if you look at the list of people who've gotten the Medal of Freedom, it's an absolute atrocity that Rush Limbaugh would get this award. It's truly crazy. But Trump has taken our institutions and literally burned them to the ground. And so I think that it is interesting. Should someone burn? I would say, Pat, my honest opinion is don't be like burn it. But
like
honestly,
Ellen DeGeneres, Joe Biden. These folks
right
don't need to burn their awards that they were given to by President Obama or previous presidents.
Right, but I do think that Trump is what's so scary about Trump. You're bringing up such a great point, which is so scary, and it ties directly into our topic today. Actually, everything kind of does. It kind of leads to this scary point, which is that these institutions that we hold dear, like are being completely tarnished, and right. Like, even it sounds really stupid, but one thing that like blew my mind was, as a kid, I went to Disney World forever, and the Hall of Presidents was like a huge deal to me.
Oh my God. Yeah. I was in the Hall of Presidents a couple years ago.
And to think that they have to add Donald Trump to that, it reminded me that like we cannot erase this. Like, it is an interesting. And look, maybe you're a supporter of him. I don't know. Maybe you'll think that's great. But we cannot erase this Trump presidency. So what we have to do is we do have to hopefully we can learn from it, right? And what I'm praying for is that this is some sort of a reset button or a reminder or a grounding, a valley reminder that actually this country does stand for something, and we
Yeah.
took a lot of it for granted at some point, and that actually a bigger percentage of us has to be patriotic, but not kayfabe, not pageantry patriotic,
Right.
which is what we were doing kind of for a long time, which is, post 9/11, it's all about just the flag. But no, what it is that respecting our institutions and not taking our freedoms and history for granted, learning from history. And so ultimately, that's the only way we can make this Trump presidency mean something. But if I wanted to tie this to professional wrestling, which is the most regular behavior you can do, there have been champions, right?
Yeah.
In time who have, you look back and you're like, wow, how is that guy on the same level as this wrestler, right?
Yes.
And they tried him. They gave somebody a go on the show. They tried something. It's up to us to not just it's up to us to have this filter and make sure that we teach in school things properly, where you're like, hey, he was given this medal, and that's because this president was power hungry, and his goal was to burn these precedented establishments to the ground. I mean, Steve Bannon, who's like the architect who was arrested, by the way, this week for defrauding God.
Arrested on a boat.
Arrested on a yacht for defrauding all the people who put money in that Kickstarter for building a wall. I mean, I just want to, we can go down that wormhole forever, but I'm going to step right back and say, Steve Bannon's, you could see interviews. I mean, Steve Bannon is a brilliant guy. I mean, he went to Harvard, he's a very smart guy. His goal was to deconstruct the administrative state, right? So this is part of that plan. They found a guy like Trump, who Roger Stone for years was like, this guy has the ability to do this. Get him in there as an anti-establishment candidate. And when you vote anti-establishment, they start tearing down the establishment. And that's going to be part of the establishment that you dig, right? Like for me, the post office being dismantled is like devastating. I adore the post office. That's part of my patriotism is tied to this fucking post office. I love it.
Yeah.
I told you this. We said it on the other episode where I was like, I would walk by it and see that building on 34th Street across from Madison Square Garden, and it's like through hail, sleet, and you think of patriots, frankly, on horses delivering mail before we had any technology.
Right. Guys wearing shorts and driving around with the door open on their truck in the middle of winter.
Right. And those weird trucks that we talked about. So I think that it's up to us to not. I think that you can see it as a good thing. Sometimes, like a blip, or on in a record, is a reminder that it needs to be taken seriously. So burning it all the way down, to Pat F, I feel like that gives into the Steve Bannon, Roger Stone game plan. And
and also these medals, I think you can look at within the context of who awarded them. Yeah. Like, okay, Joe Biden received an award with distinction from President Obama. Ellen DeGeneres, even though she's an evil human being, received it for her work and for LGBT exposure and rights. Makes sense. From Obama, makes sense. Then you have Trump, who has a record of cronyism and whatever, giving it to Rush Limbaugh. Like, okay, that's obvious. Rush Limbaugh doesn't belong in the same echelon as all the other recipients. He's, there's an asterisk next to it that it came from Trump.
Absolutely. So to tie into, Pat, we're going to come back to your second point about what happens in the streets if Trump doesn't get elected. But let's start with talking about if Trump refuses to leave office. Now, this is going to be in the vacuum of him losing legitimately or illegitimately, right? Because that's going to be that's going to be the first step in this process. Is he will not accept the results of this election, right? And as of today, I knock on wood, I don't want to jinx it or whatever, but he's poised to lose this election right now as it stands. Corona's rising, and many states that are hard red states are looking closer to swing states. But this election, right as we stand right now, it's scary in terms of institutions. Like he's already setting the stage to challenge all the mail-in votes, even though the post office has said, even with the cuts in with a big mega Trump donor and a croner as the postmaster general in charge, turning off machines, people protested enough where they're going to stop removing mailboxes. The post office is still saying that all the votes that people vote are 75% of, like, if everyone voted by mail, that's 75% of the mail that they handle in one day. So they're like, to say that we can't handle mail-in voting is ridiculous.
Of course it's ridiculous.
Right.
It's ridiculous. If we all sent a letter to one another today, the post office would not shut down. And it just doesn't make any sense.
Right. So he's gonna say with the added additional mail-in voting that's not legitimate. He's going to try to fight it. So assuming that at the end of the day, they come to the conclusion, and, we saw from Gore, Bush, that it could go down to court if it comes to like a couple thousand votes or something, assuming he just legitimately loses, what happens? That's where I'm starting from, which I don't think it's going to be like November 3rd. Even if this went without protest, they're saying now with all the mail-in voting, it's probably going to take about a week to fully count. So this is not going to be a classic election based on all the mail-in voting that we're going to have, right?
Yeah, I think that's correct.
And then tie that into the fact that he's already poised to challenge it. If he loses, he's going to challenge it so hard. And to be honest, if he wins, Biden's probably going to challenge it because of what's going on with the Postal Service.
Yeah, it's not going to be like, okay, it's 2 a.m. We have a winner.
Right. Not at all. So I'm going past that, which could be into December. Okay?
Right.
But let's say we get into something like December, which is my prediction. In December, we'll have our president named. And I believe it will be Joe Biden personally. Yeah. So here's what happens. Okay. So he can't go as of January 20th, 2021. Okay. The military technically does not owe any loyalty to Donald Trump anymore, right? Yeah. So this would actually mean that the head of the military has to actually, there has to be a full-on coup, essentially, where he has to somehow talk all these people into being like loyal to Trump after he's not the president anymore. Okay.
Right.
And so also something you should know is that the White House is just symbolic. Okay. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people are saying, oh, he won't leave the White House. Doesn't matter. If he wants to stake out in the White House,
squat.
Right. Like, so Joe Biden will be the president from his house in Delaware. It does not matter.
Joe would like that.
Right. You don't have to move into the White House. Yeah. It's just kind of something that, but there's no law stating that the president must govern from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Mm-hmm. So that's something to think about. Yeah. So if he starts issuing like executive orders and stuff, it says so the courts would start weighing in on whether the president's orders were lawful right away on Inauguration Day. Yeah. So he would start saying stuff, they'd immediately be knocking it down. So it doesn't seem like he will be like this. My point is that, yes, this is a big deal because the peaceful transition of power is kind of the beauty of this nation. It's something that, again, another example, something we've taken tremendously for granted. I know I have. Is I never even fathomed, like, what if somebody would stay? That feels like third world stuff, right?
Yeah, it's totally like something you'd hear about between warring factions in like Colombia or
It feels
something
like
like
a
that.
South American thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Not to be
totally.
like an asshole, but it feels like the
Right.
stuff you hear, and I bet a lot of the examples are from that. It's probably right. Okay, so that was something I read in one article. Then I read this other article in the Atlantic that I thought was really good. And it said, I'm just going to read it verbatim here because I
Okay.
thought it was really good. It said, if Trump were inclined to overstay his term, the levers of power work in favor of removal. Because the president immediately and automatically loses his constitutional authority upon expiration of his term or after removal through impeachment, he would lack the power to direct the U.S. Secret Service or other federal agents to protect him.
Mm-hmm.
He would likewise lose his power as the commander-in-chief of the armed forces to order a military response to defend him. In fact, the newly minted president would possess those presidential powers. If necessary, the successor could direct federal agents to forcibly remove Trump from the White House. Now a
Yes.
private citizen, Trump would no longer be immune from criminal prosecution and could be arrested and charged with trespassing in the White House.
Right.
While even former presidents enjoy Secret Service protection, agents presumably would not follow an illegal order to protect one from removal from office. Um, cool. So it seems like it's not as much of an issue as Marr is making it, although let's move on. Let's go to the next paragraph, which is Trump remaining in office seems unlikely. A more frightening and plausible scenario would be if his defeat inspired extremist supporters to engage in violence. One
Yes.
could imagine a world in which Trump is defeated in the 2020 election and he immediately begins tweeting that the election was rigged, or consider the possibility, albeit remote, that a second-term Trump is removed from office through impeachment and rails about his ouster as a coup. His message would be amplified by right-wing media. If his grievances hit home with even a few people inclined toward violence, deadly acts of violence, or even terrorist acts against the new administration could result. Ultimately, the key to the peaceful transfer of power is the conduct of the outgoing leader himself. America has thus far been lucky in that regard. After voluntarily relinquishing the presidency after his second term, Washington took measures to demonstrate the peaceful transfer of power. He attended the inauguration of his successor, John Adams, and insisted on walking behind Adams after the ceremony to display his subservience to the new president. Through this example, his citizenry was able to accept that the power of the presidency now resides in its new occupant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to say 2 points. One point is a little bit meta about this and say that it's not that easy to find articles this well written. Okay?
Thank you, Atlantic.
So, like, that's part of the reason I start this RGN, right? It's like, yeah, that was great. That was 3 paragraphs, perfectly summed it up. I had to go through 5 fucking articles that weren't even the first result in Google to find someone who can write like a person in this
Yeah.
new like blogosphere of articles. I mean, god damn it. So anyway, great. So it sounds like the biggest problem is what your dad's bringing up,
Yes.
or actually, Pat F.
Well, I'm not sure if it's my dad or not, but
right.
I didn't verify the email.
And so that seems to be actually the biggest problem, which is that if he starts riling people up, we could have massive displays of violence.
Right. Well, and the article that listener JM linked to, that was written by 2 retired Army guys, they float a hypothetical question where if Trump, a hypothetical situation where if on Inauguration Day, if Trump does not leave the White House, on one hand, you could have the Speaker of the House will declare the presidency over, and then the Secret Service and federal marshals would remove him from
Nancy
office.
Pelosi, who everyone fucking hates. I mean,
not me.
Not everyone. I love Nancy Pelosi, but
yeah.
I don't love Nancy Pelosi. I like her. In the era of Trump, I find a lot of her antics to be comforting because I find his behavior to be so ridiculous. After things get back to normal, I can go back to judging her like a normal politician.
Right,
But
absolutely.
yeah, I mean, think of all the people who would love to jump down Nancy Pelosi's throat,
Yeah,
like over her being the one making this declaration.
I support Nancy in this declaration. But the alternative situation that this article presents is that Trump has this privatized army of psychos
Right.
who may be the people who were battling the protesters following George Floyd, guys with no badges, no
Right.
names, no clear affiliation with any official body. Those people could there could be a call to arms for those people to defend President Trump from having to leave the White House, in which case the military would intervene and, you know, do whatever is necessary to get them out of there.
Right.
And
The
if they
bar.
didn't, the military, the general would be caught himself in a coup.
Right. So here's my conclusion on this thing, okay? And you'll hear people, pundits on all the news stations, especially like in the far left, will also overreact to this. But ultimately, the reality of this situation is he's not staying if he loses. Okay,
No.
there's enough levers, and kudos to our founding fathers for uh, 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 stopping Trump from doing a lot of stuff, which we showed on some of the old episodes. But I don't think he'll stay there. But I do think the real threat is his behavior and the ripple effect of his behavior, which we've seen through all this national crisis we're in, is that his irresponsibility, right, and his lack of accountability and taking this shit seriously has actually resulted in death. The same thing will happen with the transfer of power here. If he does not peacefully transfer over his power, if he doesn't accept it, the violence will ripple. He'll be responsible for it, and that is good odds. There's a really, in my opinion, a high likelihood that either way, January 20th this year is one of the sadder days of our.
I hope not.
Because of people's behavior.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, anyway, hopefully Trump just gets fucking loses and he can go to have his rallies for his fan base and rob them, make fake universities for them and whatever.
Go back
however,
to business as usual.
Right, sell them merchandise, do rallies, talk about how he was make himself a martyr. He's the best president ever that didn't get respected and right and whatever. And we can go back to some kind of new semblance of normal. Okay, so good. So okay. Time for a pee break?
Yes.
All right. Time for a pee break, which means we're going to play a song.
Okay.
Okay, we're back. All right, so great questions about the peaceful transition
Mm-hmm.
of power.
Thank you to JM and Pat F for writing into the mailbag.
Absolutely, and that ties nicely into what's going on here. We're talking about people's behavior, you know, and interesting enough, the topic for this week is basically what is QAnon. Okay, so look, I'm gonna do like a weird roundabout thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it's pretty interesting because I'm gonna make this a little anecdotal, but I was at the Grand Canyon 2 days ago,
Uh-huh.
and it's kind of amazing because you see the Grand Canyon. If you've seen it before, check it out. It's worth your time. Okay, I don't, whatever. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. But the Grand Canyon, Erin, have you been to the Grand Canyon?
I've not.
Yeah, check it out. It's massive.
Okay, noted.
But the crazy thing about it is that, like, when you look at it, my first thought is like, oh yeah, here you can look at this, and this disproves all of your religions, right? Like,
Right.
and not because of like, oh, it's God's majesties, but you're like, oh, the creation of this. Some religions believe that the Earth is 5,000 years old. I believe
Mm-hmm.
the creation of this takes millions of years,
Right.
right? And so you're like, all right, the Earth's been here longer than your documents, but you're like, so okay, whatever. We could dispute that, whatever. I'm not here to take down your beliefs. That's not my goal.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting because you think about what QAnon is, and you're like, wow, people are really suffering, man. People are fucking lost in this country,
Yes.
and in this world, people are lost in a way that, like, look, I don't have life figured out at all. That's for dang sure, but to take these walks that people are taking in today's day and age to believe the things that they believe, and it's 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 just fucking sad, especially after this week I had where I was removed from, not even removed from technology at all, but removed from the news and kind of the news cycle,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're like, look, life is bad, people are suffering and whatnot, but man, I don't know if this world was intended to be as connected as it is right now. Because when you are locally hanging out with people and connecting with humans, life
Mm-hmm.
is truly beautiful.
Yeah.
But this expanse now of connecting too many people,
Too many people.
right? And you're like, hey, this was the crazy guy in my group of friends. Hey, he's a good guy. He's just fucking nuts. Instead of it just being like he's the one nutty guy. I mean, I'm jumping around a bunch, but like it's now that guy finds a bunch of other fucking nutty guys, and he's like, I need to find my ilk. Where it used to be like, you used to listen. If you wanted to be a furry or whatever, you wanted to
Mm-hmm.
do that. You didn't need a con for that, right? You just had, hey, do you guys know Greg didn't show up for bowling on Sunday? Where was he? He was getting it out. You know what
Yeah.
I
Yes. He was wearing a furry fox costume with a friend.
He was doing his thing, whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then he
Yes.
came back to his local group where there was accountability. He had to look at people in their eyes and
Take
be
off the
like,
costume.
right. And be like, I'm going to connect with these people that I care about, I know. And even though if they're different than me, I still respect them because I know them. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that we're just getting, and I don't think this is some deep thought, but I just think that we are becoming more and more disconnected from reality as we immerse ourselves way more into technology, and the fact that we need to connect with people we agree with, right? Strangers we agree
Well,
with.
and I
I
think
don't
it's
think that's
like,
that helpful.
I think online there's a way to find community in a way that isn't easy or always available in real life. So this applies to the topic at hand. I think
Right.
that a lot of the people who are believers in this sort of thing are people who are maybe like feel alienated or ostracized from their families, local communities, friends or don't have friends, or healthy relationships, or any of that stuff. So the internet allows these people to kind of like get together on this one thing, and then that breeds more belief and crazier thought about stuff like this.
Which we'll get into. So QAnon. All right, so you're probably saying, what the fuck is QAnon? Which I will get to. I promise you, I will explain to you from my understanding of it, at least 2 articles deep, although I went a little deeper for this one, about what exactly QAnon is. But I think before, I'm going to start in kind of a roundabout way. And say, why is QAnon worth our time? Okay? There's a lot of conspiracy theories and blah, 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 weirdos out there, fringe groups that are not really worth our time. But why am I using a whole episode of this fucking coveted airspace for it? Okay. Well, that's because this woman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is basically a political novice, is running for Congress in Georgia. And she is a open QAnon supporter and is basically poised to win an open house seat because she's running on the Republican ticket, and I doubt that the Democrats going to beat her. And so basically QAnon is now openly has injected and infected our government.
Not only that, but this is an individual that Trump referred to as a future Republican star. And also he's been questioned about QAnon during press briefings lately. And his comeback is always, I don't know what they are or what they believe in or what that means, but she seems to be a good person.
Right. And
he also said, they like me, they love me. So like, I'm on board.
Right. He says, I don't know much about the movement other than I understand they like me very much, which I appreciate. And he said, I've heard that these are people that love our country. So Trump is just, looking for votes, and it's understandable. He needs them. And he's like, if you agree, and Trump's whole bag is, and he's done it before. If you're a white supremacist, there's good people on both sides, whatever. He's willing. He'll take any vote. Doesn't give a shit about your principles. So these guys are like, I heard that they're good. And if they're Republicans, it's all party lines, whatever. Okay. And, they've asked him about stuff, about what QAnon believes in. He's like, I haven't heard any of that. Cool. So, okay, here's the deal of QAnon is it started in 2017. They're saying, they're saying, okay, so when it started, it quickly grew to be like, they had like 220,000 members in their first QAnon-related Facebook group. Okay, but from now to March 2020, since then it has swelled to at least 1.7 million members. So the thing is growing. Okay, and Trump is not saying it's ridiculous. Okay,
right. He's denying any knowledge as president of the United States of what QAnon even is. Doesn't know. No one, no aide ever told him. No idea.
I'm waiting for the reveal of what it is. This is why I'm talking around what it is, because I think that's important for this. I
have a really concise definition of what QAnon is from the New York Times. If you want me to share.
Oh, yes. Well, I'll let you do that in 1 second. I just want to say is that in terms of what they believe in, he has said, actually, no, I think it's better. Go. Yeah. So that's so cool. So Trump is basically giving their candidate a nod. So they've been, and they're going to have a representative in Congress. Great.
In Georgia.
Okay. So Erin, what is QAnon?
Okay. Hold on. I had to take a sip of my LaCroix. In answer to the question, what is QAnon?
Right.
The New York Times writes, QAnon is the umbrella term for a sprawling set of internet conspiracy theories that allege, falsely, that the world is run by a cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who are plotting against Mr. Trump while operating a global sex trafficking ring. QAnon followers believe that this clique includes top Democrats, including Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, George Soros, as well as a number of entertainers and Hollywood celebs like Oprah, Tom Hanks, Ellen, Pope Francis, and the Dalai Lama. Many believe that in addition to molesting children, members of this group kill and eat their victims in order to extract a life-extending chemical from their blood. And according to QAnon lore, Mr. Trump was recruited by top military generals to run for president in 2016 in order to break up this criminal conspiracy, end its control of politics and the media, and bring its members to justice. So, in a nutshell, that is the origins and the loose definition of QAnon.
Okay, so all right, so let's break that down exactly. So the mission statement of QAnon is that they believe. Did you tie it into Trump yet or no?
Well, they do. The definition does tie it into Trump because.
And what's the line about Trump?
That
I don't want to read
that this ring of pedophiles and cannibals are plotting against Trump because Trump was installed as president by top military generals to bring this group down.
Right. So their belief is that Trump is in office, and he nods to them.
Yes.
That he is there as a protector from the Satan-worshipping pedophile power players that control Hollywood.
Yes.
And so that, like Hillary Clinton, the whole Clinton family, they haven't really tied Obama to it, right?
Well, Obama was mentioned in this definition, but I'm not sure what allegations there are against him.
Yeah, why don't they should throw Obama in there. Why not, right?
I guess they did. I also just want to say that I know this from a little bit of
They don't need to take down Obama, by the way. I just want to say they don't.
Yeah.
I just want to say they don't have to because he's black. So they're
right.
like, well, they're like, hey, we don't need to tie him to.
No.
We don't need. They already are like, no, these people are not going to vote for him for that reason.
Precisely.
Right, anyway.
But I do know that I believe that members of QAnon believe that they get messages that are transmitted from President Trump to them via Q, who does these things called Q drops. And evidently this is an insider, I think, who posted originally on 4chan. And so these people who believe that they're part of this group that's battling pedophiles and cannibals wait for these kind of transmissions and like winks and nods from the president, like, I'm here, I'm doing the work.
And they even say like they look at Trump's like hand signals and they're like, look, he's making a Q.
There's a lot of reading into signals with QAnon, and it goes both ways. It goes from like, oh, Trump is sending us a signal with this hand motion, and also look at this thing, this is code for like pedophilia. And I have a few fun anecdotes about QAnon theories regarding
one thing and I think you should just go right into that because you have I would say that Q, the definition out here is Q is Q, like the guy or the woman, whatever, is purported to be a high-level government official with access to classified intelligence and the leader of the secret movement to thwart the pedophile ring.
Right. So one anecdotal example of things that QAnon has uncovered that I thought was particularly outrageous was, a number of celebrities are thought to be in this ring, one of which is Hillary Duff, Lizzie McGuire, as you know her. And a theory that came out recently was Hillary Duff shared a photo to her social media, and it was a photo of a collage of pictures of her family and, pictures of her kids and whatever. And in one of the photos, in the collage, there was a photo of her child in a bathtub. And QAnon interpreted this to be, look at Hillary Duff. She's posting this so that the other pedophiles can see that her son is available for sex trafficking.
What the fuck?
Yes.
So like, what is there any proof involved in this stuff? Because I have a similar thing from what happened with Oprah,
Well, I have one other one that I really like that I'd like to share. But just to make it clear, every article, every definition, including on Wikipedia, says that none of this is based in fact. There's no, and QAnon would argue against this. Their thing is like, do your own research, but there's no evidence. There's no criminal records to support that Ellen or Hillary Duff are actual pedophiles. This is all just internet conjecture. But another thing that I've read into is a little thing called Wayfair Gate, which is a theory that QAnon, Mike, my husband, and I have looked into this because he may or may not be related to someone who's a QAnon believer. But Wayfair Gate essentially is the website Wayfair, where you can order stools and home decor, is a cover for child sex trafficking. Right. And an example that they share is there was a toy box for sale at an inordinate price for a toy box on their website. And it might have actually been on Walmart's website now that I think about it, but all these websites are in on it. So this toy box that's for sale on Walmart for like $5,000 has the name Dylan like decoratively printed across the front of it. Like, look, you can personalize it. And there's a missing boy from like Georgia or something who's also named Dylan. So the theory is that if you buy this $5,000 toy box that happens to have the name Dylan printed on it, you'll buy it and Dylan will be delivered to your home for sex trafficking. Oh my God. Yes. So that's a little taste of.
Well, should we start a Kickstarter to buy the Dylan thing and see?
Well, if we I said like, well, what if I went on Wayfair and like I ordered like a flower pot or something and I paid like, I don't know, $300 for it. And like, what if a kid shows up? What do you do?
Well, I mean, this is oh my God. I hope this pod grows to a level where we can start debunking conspiracies through funding.
I know. Well, Wayfair did like, because this all came out and Wayfair was like,
did it?
Well, no, Wayfair was like, we don't, because Wayfair is like Amazon, where I think like you can be a seller on there. And then we were like, we don't know why this pillow was $3,000, but like the pricing, we've taken it down. Like, so, you know.
Oh, so it was like mispriced?
Yeah, like it would be like a throw pillow or like a blanket for like $2,500.
Oh, can you imagine if they accidentally mailed a kid?
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, what if you buy just like a pillow for your couch and you get like a kid in a box?
Oh my God.
Like, what do you do with that? And I mean, like, here's the thing, like, not to give my opinion too much, but I also just want to note that child sex trafficking is a big problem. In fact, the New York Times did a huge article on it, I think in 2018.
It is a big problem?
It's a big problem. That's a non-exclusive.
We should lock that in.
An RGN non-exclusive.
You heard it.
But anyways, there's a lot of like governing body, or like, you know, police and special units that are dedicated to this. And it's also worth noting that QAnon's mission is to stop pedophiles, but they also don't seem to have stopped any pedophiles. Like they are focused on this fiction, this ring of Dems and Hollywood celebrities that run a pedophile sex trafficking ring, but I don't know. So it doesn't seem like they've actually done anything.
That ties into this like Oprah thing, because it looks like there's this Save the Children campaign, which I think Oprah is a part of.
Save the Children,
right?
For the best bidder.
Yeah. Right, and so I guess they were saying QAnon. Hold on, I just want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, so it says, earlier this month, QAnon conspiracy theorists co-opted the Save the Children campaign, sending posts surging while mixing in pro-Trump QAnon theories to win new adherents. QAnon followers flooded the nonprofit National Human Trafficking Hotline with phone calls, straining resources needed to track real missing children.
Oh, my God.
Right. Yeah. So, because, apparently, Oprah fought against this. I imagine, they're saying Oprah's part of a human trafficking ring as someone she was the product of molestation and is always trying to help children. So, including coming out against Michael Jackson, which was a huge, gave her a lot of heat. So
Yeah.
for them to come in here and co-opt that is pretty crazy. So listen to this. There are currently 20 candidates, 19 Republicans and 1 independent who have endorsed or given credence to this conspiracy theory. Um, they've secured they've endorsed it, and they've secured a spot on the ballot in the 2020 congressional elections. So, like, these people are actually getting into government. Like, because you imagine, like, someone like this actually voting in the House. Now, look, the House, there's a lot of representatives.
Yes.
You're like, I want one idiot here and there. And trust me, there's a lot more than one.
Yeah.
But how far are we away from a Senate seat?
Right.
Being
right.
one of these morons. We already have yeah, so but okay, so I mean, that's basically the whole thing with it is this all stems from, by the way, if you remember, like, Pizzagate. This is kind of the evolution of Pizzagate.
Yes.
For you don't know, that is 2016 Pizzagate. That was a conspiracy theory, which was the same kind of thing about a cabal of Satan worshiping pedophile power players that control Hollywood, and they were saying only Trump can fight these guys. And so literally in 2016, Hillary Clinton was the big person in Pizzagate. So they had said that Hillary Clinton was operating what do you call it? Like a pedophile sex ring out of a pizza place in D.C., right? And this guy in 2016, a North Carolina man, he drove to D.C. and he entered a pizza restaurant with a firearm to investigate the child sex trafficking conspiracy. And he opened fire on a locked closet door because he was like, that leads down to where the kids, like, he thought he's a hero. And he's serving 4 years. This guy's probably about to get out.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm saying this stuff actually affected the 2016. Like, this is stuff Hillary Clinton had to spend time even acknowledging in 2016, and led her to say, "Oh, well, there's a what'd she say? Deplorables." This is what she was talking about, and then even people that I know, I won't say who, but someone I know took offense to Hillary's deplorable line. And I was like, she's talking about this shit.
Right.
And obviously it was a boomer who doesn't understand this nuance that there are deplorables on the internet. You're not, like, deep in 4chan and Reddit, but they fucking exist. And we need to call them that, because this is the problem. It's like, we can't have real discussions. We say it on here all the time. And so, like, here we go. Here's something. Like, for example, okay, Jeb Bush, right?
Yeah.
He says, why in the world would the president not kick QAnon supporters' butts? Nut jobs, racist haters have no place in either party. It's like, dude, you're already acting like he's a normal person in that. Like, why wouldn't he do that? You know what? He's a fucking maniac. He stands for nothing.
Right.
He gets off on this chaos,
And it's like you said before, these people will vote for him, and he knows he needs the votes. So no group that supports him will be condemned. It's also worth noting, reported by Axios, today, I believe, that there is a bipartisan resolution being introduced in the House to condemn QAnon. And this is a joint effort by a Democratic rep from Jersey and a Republican rep from Virginia who want to condemn the QAnon conspiracy theory.
Right. And
because
also
it's dangerous, anti-Semitic, and a conspiracy-mongering cult that radicalizes violence.
You notice how always anti-Semitism is always in the mix.
You like how it's snuck in there?
It's always that play, right? It's always in the mix.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's like, even when I think it has nothing to do with the Jews, they find a way. Yeah. So anyway, this has been in the FBI. The FBI declared the QAnon potential domestic terrorist threats. And so they say they represent a militant and anti-establishment ideology which finds resonance with far-right extremist movements.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really connecting with Trump's base, which is why he's not going to come out against it.
Right.
He's the king of he just loves the fucking base. But look, the bottom line is that this has been spreading, we've been saying it the whole time through social media, which brings us back to another topic that it keeps coming back to the same thing on this podcast, which is like the role of social media and the responsibility of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok to take actions to thwart this stuff. So this is where it starts being kind of controversial. So Facebook announced on Wednesday that it was removing 790 groups, 100 pages, and 1,500 ads related to QAnon. So, following similar actions Facebook and others have taken earlier this month. So, we've seen, this is a quote from Facebook. They said, "We have seen growing movements that, while not directly organizing violence, have celebrated violent acts, shown that they have weapons, and suggest they will use them, or have individual followers with patterns of violent behavior." But they're saying some experts think that these actions taken by social media giants are too little, too late. Yes. There's a podcast out there. It's only, God, of course, there's a guy who just has a QAnon podcast. He goes, "I assume that once it became obvious that this was a serious problem, that the intervention would come." And so, so here's the thing. So, there's a bunch of stuff. I won't even go through all of it, where it's like, MIT put out a study saying that, they say it's, some people are like, it's too late. It's already grown to a size where you can't stop it. And then also I've seen some stuff which is here. The Guardian said a Pew Research poll found that 76% of Americans know nothing about QAnon, 20% knew a little, and only 3% knew a lot. So they're saying it's not as big of a deal as we're saying.
In fact, there was after the DNC last week, one night, one of the ladies on the desk at MSNBC was getting razzed by her colleagues because she mispronounced QAnon as Quanon, because it was the first time she had ever seen it in her teleprompter.
Yeah, good.
And she didn't know. She's like, I never read it before. She's like, I never thought I'd have a reason to read QAnon.
Yosemite?
She's like, yeah, Yosemite on a teleprompter. Yosemites.
Oh, my friend Jason Sands, he's wearing a shirt that says Yosemite, but it's just a space between the O and the S. Fucking hilarious.
That's beautiful.
Well, it's funny. I had heard that Donald Trump struggles to read a long time ago, before he was the president. Fuck it, I don't care. I heard it from people at SNL when he was at the table reads, when he was hosting SNL during his election. He said, like, he had a really hard time reading the scripts.
That's why during his briefings, they only give him numbers to read.
Right. Well, he sucks at reading off the prompter. It's like he reads like a fucking second grader.
Oh,
I mean, no, like that take, like, you think you're the president, I would work on that. Anyway, God.
Kofifi?
Kofifi, one of the greatest moments in history. So, like, look, here's just let's just end this on a discussion here, and I'm curious what your opinion is. Which is to say, yes, you could argue a lot of people don't know what it is, but that's the danger of this, because you have actual candidates people are voting for. Like, a lot of people just vote down party lines. They just go red, 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 blue, 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 blue. And if these people are actually on the ballot and they don't know that they're conspiracy theorists. So one thing we need to all do, and I after this election, I implore everyone to, like, I'm not voting down party lines anymore after this election. And I think everyone needs to think like that, because going forward, if the left backlash is just how it goes. The left backlash against this Trump presidency will likely be more extreme left candidates. Some of them who may be, I don't know, like fucking Nick Cannon or something. You know what I mean? Right?
God.
You know what I mean? So it's important to be like, hey, like a guy like John Kasich, who, whatever, I disagree with him in a million ways, but it's still a guy who's able to be like, hey, Joe Biden's clearly, even though I'm a lifelong Republican, the second he gets into this White House, I'm going to start disagreeing with him. But keep in mind, John Kasich, not in office anymore, which seems to be the only guy, but a guy like Mitt Romney, who had the balls to stick up for what was wrong against some of his family's interests. I believe his daughter or his niece works for Donald Trump, and he still voted to impeach him. these are the kind of people. I'm not saying Mitt Romney's great and blah blah blah. He's still a kooky
Right.
Mormon and whatever. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
but the fact that like I'm looking for someone I think has some morality to them, and that's gonna go
Absolutely.
for both sides for me. You know?
Yeah. Well, and I think that from watching the DNC, that was a message that they presented and that people are expressing. Like, obviously, they did this on purpose, but a lot of the people they talked to, which I hope is representative of the population at large,
Right.
are, folks who are a little older who said, like, listen, one woman said I voted for a Republican candidate in every election since the Reagan years. A lot of people like our parents'
Right.
age who have always been Republicans but who have been let down. So like, I don't think it's as easy anymore to be like, hey, I'm a lifelong Republican. This is just what it is. Like Donald Trump has completely like flip that thing. In fact, I read an article on Politico about how like Donald Trump has completely dismantled conservatism. Like,
yeah, I mean the GOP stands for almost nothing now. They're trying to
yes,
piece together the messages of this RNC convention.
they don't even have
And
a platform for
right,
it.
the
There's
platform
nothing.
is essentially Trumpism and fear,
Yeah,
which is like there's an attack on the suburbs, which
right.
is not true.
No,
So you're gonna take your guns, which is never happened.
no,
So I don't know what.
can't happen.
Right. So I don't even. Yeah. It's pretty interesting. But Erin. So the last thing. I have a pretty, I guess, kind of a controversial stance here, maybe against some people. It's like, I'm not 100% sure that it's Facebook's job to take down these groups. You know, like
Right.
I do think like we are getting into some First Amendment gray areas where if we are moving on to a more of a virtual platform, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And if we're all connecting more virtually, you know, uh, First Amendment rights are almost, especially now with this pandemic. Like, imagine they start saying like Zoom, like this conversation goes through some kind of filter, and because we're talking about QAnon, it
Yeah.
gets taken down. I mean, we
Right.
already have friends who like they're getting suspended from Facebook out of nowhere for stuff, and like
Right.
these are actual like communication tools that we rely on at this point. So I really don't really believe in deplatforming. I don't think. I mean, it's scary to say that because they're like it's like Alex Jones. I want them down. I don't want them
Right.
making money off of like misinformation and disinformation. But like that is not really the big problem. The big problem is the guy in the White House. Like the big problem
Right.
is like that we need leadership who tells us this shit's nuts and it has to sink back into the fringes.
Right. I think that's absolutely true is that
Yeah.
Trump is the problem but Trump is their guy. And I agree like, hey, we shouldn't be banned on Facebook for
Right.
making a joke about Canada, okay? But like I think that when it comes to deplatforming or banning these QAnon supporters, it's like, look, like QAnon has already been classified by the FBI as like a lightly dangerous, maybe
Right.
terrorist group. And not only that, but I also think there's pressure to do so because Facebook found that they had made money off of advertisements for QAnon promotional ads. Like one
Right.
was for a march in Detroit. Like Facebook has made money off of QAnon ads. So
Absolutely.
I think it's part of them saying like, we don't support this. This is not where we want our money to come from. And I also think they recognize that they're like, hey, we're part of the reason why this whole thing exists to begin with, because they found their community on our site and they're not, if they're being classified as a threat by the FBI, we don't want to be part of that.
Right. Right. Right.
And
Right. Right.
Zuckerberg is just like, I think he's like a trillionaire who just like bends over backwards and like, I don't know what his politics are, but I do think that Facebook doesn't want to be on the wrong side of the law in this instance.
Well, that ties into our conversation from weeks back, where we were talking about Joe Biden running on the ticket of less like shareholder politics and blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
I personally believe that the system is what makes people bad over the person being bad. I
Mm-hmm.
believe Mark Zuckerberg and his wife are actually good, decent people, and I also believe that Bill Gates right, had to remove himself to do actual good acts and whatnot. You know
Right.
what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. And like
But when you run a
yeah.
publicly traded, I'm just saying, when you run a
Mhm.
publicly traded company that in the environment now is only to post quarterly earnings and you have to start walking away from hundreds of millions of dollars,
Mhm.
I feel like that's when it gets complicated. Same thing as Vince McMahon, which we've talked about on
Right.
our pro wrestling podcast, but everything is wrestling right now. Like, he has deals with Saudi Arabia, and they're like literally hundreds of millions of dollars of deals, and he's running a publicly traded company. Walking away from that kind of money, you're just an irresponsible lead director. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's
So,
true.
right? So
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
I think that's what makes it tricky for a guy like Zuckerberg. Is I agree he should have more of a spine, but the repercussions in
Yes.
our current state right now, which is why we all need to stand for more, which is
Mhm.
why I liked that as a platform for Joe Biden. It gets no attention because just like how aliens gets no attention, right?
Right,
We
right.
should go into that. We should go into that
Okay.
on another episode about that guy who was vindicated by the government, who said that he worked for the government on Area 51 style
Mhm.
stuff, and
Mhm.
for years was labeled a quack. And then, but obviously,
Maybe we can get him on the show.
it's all coronavirus right now, and I'm glad we didn't
Yeah.
talk that much about coronavirus. This election, that they said it on the news, and it's true. It's the top three voting points, platforms, or whatever issues for this election are corona, corona, corona. You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like again, going back to the DNC, like that was obviously, and in the advertisements even now, like
Right.
that's a huge, huge talking point. And and I mean, if they're not selling it, they're telling stories of people who've been affected by COVID, um, people who've died, who voted for Trump
Right.
before, and the repercussions in their family, blah blah blah. Like it is, there's
Yeah.
many reasons why this election, like the Biden campaign has many purposes, but like
Hmm.
one of the big things is battling the virus.
Absolutely. And yeah, and I saw a little bit of Michelle Obama's speech because I was away, but I saw just one thing she said, and it's like exactly why I started this podcast. Just some fucking regular straight talk, which is like, this guy is not up to this moment. And that's
Yes.
no one, that's irrefutable. This guy is not up for this moment. There might be problems with Joe Biden. There might be problems with Kamala Harris. There might be problems with every people they put into each position. But the
Mm-hmm.
bottom line is none of it is going to be as bad or as inadequate as this man who's.
Yeah.
So it just
And
is what it is.
and I mean, they said like, I forget who it was who said it, but I think maybe it was Bloomberg, Mayor Bloomberg, who said that like Trump has done a shitty job basically for 4 years. Why would you hire him again? Like,
Right, that's what I'm saying. So it's like, and there's a lot of this behavior. This, I don't know. I hate to be the fucking millennial or whatever.
huh?
This who's like just shitting on the boomers, but there is this behavior of like, yeah, well, I'm not gonna vote for Biden, or and it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna vote for Trump, but listen. Any vote that's not Joe Biden, unfortunately, and we could fix this system later, we could talk about it later. Unfortunately, considering the gerrymandering, aka the synonym for gerrymandering is cheating,
Mm-hmm.
that happens mostly on the Republican side, the GOP side, needs to be stopped, and there's only one way to counterbalance it, and it just is what it is. So if you want to vote for a third party candidate, go for it. It's a vote for Donald Trump. It's just
Absolutely. I mean, like, I keep seeing this online. Like, don't
yeah,
let your own personal feelings of like being woke or whatever stand in the way of
yeah.
voting Trump out of the office. Like, this is not, unfortunately, this is not an option. And like, yeah, we can sort it out later, but like, we must vote Trump out of office. It just doesn't, he's not
That's
up
it.
for it.
And then we
And
can laugh at Joe
yeah,
Biden's plagiarism, blatant
forget
plagiarism
it.
of speeches and blah blah
Yeah.
blah, and all the classic stupid shit these Democrats, not Democrats, fine, politicians do, but man, and Erin,
Yes.
just to sum up, to end this, to sum up
Mm-hmm.
today,
Mm-hmm.
like my takeaway from today.
Yeah.
Is to say that really, I think the key is leadership. That actually, the president, the role of president at the top of the executive branch, it matters so much more than I ever realized. And
Yeah.
if you want to talk about if you're a Republican and you believe in trickle down economics, well then surely you should be able to take a short leap over to trickle down leadership, right?
It's
And
a quick
trickle
leap.
down, yeah, trickle down insanity.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
this behavior at the top has led to wild behavior at the bottom, and this is part of it.
Yeah,
The
I
president's
know.
words enabling this kind of stuff, it makes it grow bigger instantly. You know,
Right. Right.
it's hard for me to fathom because, again, like I always say on this podcast, is that I've never looked towards leadership really from the presidency.
Well, yeah, and in the past, like, I always, when I was growing up, I always kind of felt like, well, what the president does doesn't really affect me. Like when I was younger, I thought like, well, I've never been impacted by like things that presidents have done. So
right.
whatever. But now I'm an adult. I'm an elder millennial at this point. And like,
Yes.
yeah, it does. It affects not only you. You shouldn't be just concerned about yourself, but like the people around you, other human beings who exist. And I don't know. I think if you watch the DNC and you heard Joe and
Yeah.
Kamala speak, it's like their message is very clear. It's that they don't just represent the people who vote for them. They want to represent all Americans, and that being a Republican doesn't make you un-American. It doesn't make you a bad person. They want to support everyone. And Trump, as we've seen, is really just in it for himself and his cronies. So like
Right.
this isn't
This is a return.
Yeah.
This is a return to true order.
Yeah.
And truthfully, yeah. In that way, they are the actual law and order candidates, and so I think it really matters, and I think that it's interesting because the more that I think there's just kind of a direct relationship, the more that this dude. That Trump doesn't rein it in, the more that we actually kind of lose freedoms at the bottom, including stuff like now Facebook, right? He's enabling these groups. They're growing significantly since he's taken office, and hate is growing, and all this stuff's affecting actually our First Amendment rights in a way.
Yeah.
So anyway, everybody, this is the deal with QAnon. It's important. I think my other takeaway is not just voting party lines. It's looking into who these people are. One thing that I've done when it comes to elections that I recommend is check out, there's a lot of podcasts, listen to people who are more people that you respect. Look, the reality is I'm a regular guy. That's the whole premise of this pod, right? I'm not going to sit there and read every candidate's like every down ballot candidate's track record. It's just not going to happen. I'm too busy looking at wrestlers' trunks, right?
Yes.
I'm too busy working out, doing
well,
bullshit.
You know what, Dad? Since you're too busy, there is one easy thing that I think we all can do. And I know the state of California offers this. And I think where I used to live in Pennsylvania does too. When you go online, when you register to vote, when you decide to get your ballot by mail or check your status, you can check a box and they will mail you a teensy weensy pamphlet that details the ticket in your area. So you can easily read a little booklet on who the candidates are in your area. Super simple. I'm sure every state, every area offers it. So something to consider for the busy folks out there.
Right. And if that sounds like too much for you, because honestly, that's a little much for me, but it's not a lot at all. What I do is I texted my friend Travis Helwig. I texted him. I know he's very politically active.
Can you give Travis's number out over the show?
Hey, this is Travis's number.
Okay.
I forgive me and him. He has some kind of role on the Pod Save America. Like he's involved in that.
Jon Favreau.
Right. So he's involved in that. So I go, hey, I text him. I go, hey, what's your voting record? He goes, hey, I posted on my Instagram. Here's how I'm voting. And then I look at that. I did a little research off of that. But whatever. Still, as opposed to just going in blind and voting across the board, you don't want to go in and accidentally vote for Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Who's a QAnon. Do you want one of these QAnon people in office? Vote for. There's someone running against her who has a level head. You know?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the takeaway. But everybody,
there you go.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Regular Guy News. And I'm actually kind of happy we skipped last week because people were asking me where it is, which I appreciate because we record these pods into a vacuum. Erin's on the field. I'm here at home.
It's crazy.
She's I believe she's right now 1 mile out in Los Feliz.
Yes, I'm 1 mile out at this moment. You're correct.
Yeah, and in Los Angeles, but. Thank you for your feedback. If you are into this podcast and you like it, we are a budding, brand new podcast. Word of mouth, I always think is the strongest. When someone tells me to listen to something, someone told me to listen to this podcast the other day. They was like, this is really good, and I listened to it. I'll plug it. It was the Root of All Evil, the Black Dahlia podcast about the Black Dahlia murder. Pretty interesting podcast. I listened to that. So I know for me. So if you like this podcast, tell one person about it right now. That's all I'm asking for.
Tell one person. And then also, if you have time, ask that person if they have a plan to vote in November.
That's right. Yeah, I truthfully, I'd rather have less listeners and more people voting for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at right now.
It could be an either or.
But yeah, thank you. And also, if you want to hit the mailbag, Regular Guy Mail.
Regular Guy News.
Regular Guy. Oh,
that's the name of our show. RegularGuyNews at gmail.com.
RegularGuyNews@gmail.com. Email. And we're getting some good people hitting the mailbag. And remember, if you have an iPhone, it takes 1 second. On this stream, on this scroll down. More you are listening than giving us 5 stars. So
yeah, Dad.
Yeah. So go scroll down, give us 5 stars, write a comment on there, and I legally have to read your comment on here. So you might call me a jabroni, whatever it is, and if you do, I have to read it legally on the podcast. So everybody, thank you for listening to the Regular Guy News. This podcast drops every. What is it? Wednesday morning? Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, right?
Yeah, depends.
It depends. But we're basically Wednesday on your commute if we ever commute again.
Yeah, on your virtual commute to your home office to take a Zoom call.
All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Regular Guy News podcast. This is RGN. I am your anchor, Daniel Evan Black. And everybody, stay regular. Oh, that's gross. That can't be my catchphrase.
Stay uninformed. Signing off.